Eddie Edwards. So, what is the latest with Eddie Edwards and the Impact World Championship? Of course, Eddie Edwards is the brand new spoilers if you've been living under a rock or avoided any of the Slammiversary news that happened last weekend. But Eddie Edwards is the brand new Impact World Champion after winning what was in the end a fatal five-way match for the vacant Impact World Championship. That match, of course, had Eddie Edwards himself in it, Trey Miguel, Ace Austin, Eric Young, and Rich Swann all competing for the vacant Impact World Championship. But Eddie Edwards managed to get the victory last, eliminating Ace Austin to become the Impact World Champion for the second time in his career. The heart and soul, that's what they keep calling him, right? The heart and soul of Impact Wrestling, Eddie Edwards. I saw quite a few people that were a bit, I don't want to say disappointed, but some people that they wouldn't have gone with Eddie Edwards as to be the Impact World Champion straight away. And I understand that point of view. I think a lot of people thought that, well, first of all, I think a lot of people thought that EC3 was going to be the one, right, to be the final mystery entrant, myself included, and I thought EC3 was going to win the title there, but it was Eddie Edwards, and to me that makes a lot of sense. As I mentioned, they are positioning him as the underdog babyface, the Daniel Bryan style babyface in Impact Wrestling, the heart and soul of Impact Wrestling, the sort of Tommy Dreamer-like figure. It makes sense to make him world champion. He's been with the company for a very, very long time now. It's got to be, 6 years, 7 years? So he's done his time in the company. He's a company man. He's very well respected in the locker room. For the longest time, he was a big guy on the independent scene in Ring of Honor and such, as a tag team guy with Davey Richards as part of the Wolves. But recently, he's transitioned into this singles wrestler in Impact Wrestling over the last few years and has done very well doing so. Become a bit of a never give up, never say die, kind of hardcore, kind of crazy singles wrestler, and his success has been rewarded, and his hard work and dedication has been rewarded. I think it's a smart move by Impact Wrestling, quite frankly, to make your champion someone that you know isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. I don't think Eddie Edwards is going to go to AEW. I don't think he's going to go to WWE. He had that tryout with NXT as part of the Wolves back in, gosh, when was that? It might have been 2014, 2013. Didn't pay off, didn't happen, and he went to TNA, Impact Wrestling at the time, and fast forward all these years later, and he's the Impact World Champion for the second time. So a big congratulations to him. I think it's a really interesting time and an interesting decision to have him as the Impact World Champion. But what he did say this past week on Impact Wrestling, he said that he's going to be doing an open challenge format. He's going to defend the championship against anyone and all comers, right? The typical babyface champion promo. But mentioned he's going to be doing an open challenge every week to defend the Impact World Championship, akin to the John Cena United States Championship Open Challenge format, akin to the Cody Rhodes TNT Championship Open Challenge format. He's going to be doing the same thing and defending the championship pretty much every week on Impact Wrestling. Now, I made my thoughts about this the other day, but I'll touch on it here again. Personally, I'd rather they didn't do this. The reason as to why I think they shouldn't do this is I think a World Championship match in any company should be special and it should be saved for pay-per-views and the occasional TV. I don't like seeing it done every single week. The World Championship, to me, just the mystique of it loses its value if it's been defended every single week. Only certain people, I think, should be able to challenge for a world championship, because once you challenge for a world championship, you're elevated to a next level and you're deemed worthy of being in a world championship match. So I'm not massively keen on that idea. I like the open challenge style format. I think it does well for ratings. I think it does well for buzz, and I think it gets people talking. And also, I think it gives people an opportunity that wouldn't get it previously. You look at the John Cena United States Championship Open Challenge, some of the great matches he had there and some of the opponents he faced, he would have never have usually faced. But because of the Open Challenge format, he was able to do so. Likewise with Cody Rhodes currently in AEW. Because of the TNT Championship Open Challenge format, he's faced the likes of Sonny Kiss, Eddie Kingston, Ricky Starks, Mark Quinn, and others that probably Cody Rhodes wouldn't have faced usually on AEW Dynamite. It gave them an opportunity to have a platform to perform, to show what they can do, to get themselves over, and in some cases, if you're Ricky Starks and potentially Eddie Kingston, win yourself a contract. So I'm a big fan of the Open Challenge format. I think it's quite exciting, and I think it adds a lot of interest to that segment. But for a World Championship, that doesn't necessarily fly with me. I don't know. I don't think the World Championship should be defended in that way. Maybe I'm a bit true traditionalist there, but maybe it will help with drawing more people to watch Impact Wrestling on Tuesday nights on Access TV. We'll have to wait and see with that one. So who could be facing Eddie Edwards in these open challenges? Well, it's certainly interesting. We know that this coming week on Impact Wrestling on Access TV, it'll be Trey Miguel being the first challenger against Eddie Edwards. He confronted him backstage on Impact Wrestling this past week and said, I hear you're doing an open challenge. I want to be the first challenger. Eddie Edwards accepted. So we're going to have Eddie Edwards versus Trey Miguel next week for the Impact World Championship. Now, is Trey Miguel going to win? No, he isn't. Sometimes, again, that's part of the problem with the open challenge format, in that is initially you know that everyone that faces the champion is going to lose, because that's just how it works. Whereas as you go on, then it starts to get exciting as to, is there really going to be someone that finally defeats the champion. But Trey Miguel versus Eddie Edwards, it'll be a great match. I have no doubt it'll be a great match. I personally feel that Trey should be more focused on the X Division right now. I think him being around the World Championship picture is great, but I just think his style and the way that he wrestles and the crowded picture of the Impact World Championship scene right now, he could be used better by the company in being in the X Division Championship scene, going against the likes of Chris Bay. I'd really like to see. So hopefully he moves back to there shortly. As I mentioned, he will be again facing Eddie Edwards next week on Impact Wrestling, and I don't think he'll win. I would be floored if he won. But I'm sure it'll be a great match. But what other names could we expect to see Eddie Edwards face off against in the future? Well, I've jotted down a few names here. One being Ace Austin. It makes sense logically that Ace Austin would be one of the people to challenge Eddie Edwards. The reason as to why is, of course, Ace Austin was the person that Eddie Edwards defeated at Slammiversary to capture the Impact World Championship. They were the final two competitors in the match, and Eddie Edwards managed to defeat him after the Boston Knee Party, hitting it for the second time in the match. So it makes sense that Ace Austin would once again want to try and get some form of revenge and capture the Impact World Championship. Also going in to that match at Slammiversary and in the hype packages and on commentary, Don Callis and Josh Matthews mentioned this several times on commentary. They mentioned that Ace Austin, if he won the Impact World Championship, would become the youngest world champion in Impact Wrestling history. I still think they'll pay that off at some point. I was surprised that they didn't at Slammiversary, because I thought because they were doubling down on it so hard, I thought it made the most sense for them to cash in on that at that event. I don't know how long they have left for that. I believe the youngest champion in the company's history is AJ Styles. I don't have to hand right now how old AJ Styles was when he became the world champion for the first time. You can, of course, let me know if you do find out in the comment section below. But Ace Austin, if he had have won at Slammiversary, he would have been the youngest world champion in the company's history. So I do think at some point they will still pay that off. To me, it just makes the most sense to do that. And I think Ace Austin is Impact World Champion material. I really do think he's World Champion material. He, whilst he is young, I think his promos are great. I think his look's great. His work in the ring is great too. And I think it's a matter of time. He looks to be busy with Madman Fulton in a bit of a feud with the Good Brothers right now on Impact Wrestling, so maybe we won't see an Impact World Championship match between him and Eddie Edwards too soon. Maybe we might see it really soon, but it features a run-in by the Good Brothers themselves. We'll have to wait and see on that one, but certainly could have Ace Austin versus Eddie Edwards in the future. Now, another name that comes straight to mind, of course, is Eric Young. This past week, when Eddie Edwards was announcing the Open Challenge for the Impact World Championship, he was, of course, interrupted by Eric Young himself. Eric Young was a part of the Impact World Championship Fatal 5-Way match at Slammiversary this past weekend. Eddie Edwards completely dressed Eric Young down for what he did to Rich Swann at Slammiversary. Of course, Rich Swann eliminated Eric Young from the match at Slammiversary. Swann had just returned from a serious leg injury. He had to have 2 surgeries, screws, plates, you name it, put into his leg. People questioned if he was ever going to wrestle again, but he returned after something like 7 or 8 months. Eliminated Eric Young. Eric Young goes crazy, attacks Rich Swann, attacks his surgically repaired leg, smashes Rich Swann's ankle and leg around a ring post, and then smashes a steel chair next to the ring post with Rich Swann's ankle and leg in between it. So Eddie Edwards said, for what you did at the weekend, for what you did at Slammiversary, you're not getting an Impact World Championship shot. And of course, that isn't going to be the case. At some point, we all know, because it's pro wrestling, at some point Eric Young will challenge Eddie Edwards for the Impact World Championship. It's just a matter of when and how Eric Young manages to convince Eddie Edwards to give him that opportunity. I think it will happen eventually, and I think also it will factor into the return of Rich Swann to Impact Wrestling and factor into Eric Young and Rich Swann down the road. I think eventually Eric Young will convince Eddie Edwards to give him a World Championship shot, and I think during the match it will seem as if Eric Young is just about to win the match via some form of shenanigans, which leads to Rich Swann returning to Impact Wrestling, and which distracts Eric Young and allows Eddie Edwards to win, which sets up a Eric Young versus Rich Swann match sometime down the line, most likely Bound for Glory. So we're going to see Eric Young versus Eddie Edwards, we know, at some point in the near future. So what about some other names? What about Chris Bay, the current and new X Division champion? For the longest time, was it option C? Was the thing with the X Division championship? You could cash in your X Division championship and go for a World Championship, but it meant vacating the X Division championship at that time. I really enjoyed that idea, and it was done so successfully by the likes of Austin Aries. Obviously, it was done unsuccessfully by others. I'm not saying that this is going to be the case here. That's just what they did in the past. But I think they could do a nice champion versus champion match in the Open Challenge. Just because Chris Bay doesn't win the match, and I don't think he would, defeat Eddie Edwards for the Impact World Championship. But just because he's in the match doesn't mean he has to give up his X Division Championship. But that's a main event that is worthy of an Impact Wrestling show and could probably help draw some viewers in, right? Having a champion versus champion, the X Division champion answers the Open Challenge and says, not only I'm going to be holding the X Division Championship and be the king of the X Division, we always talk about Chris Bay and choose Bays, but I'm also going to be the Impact World Champion, and every Bay is going to be choose Bay, or something like that. They could do fun like that, right? So I'd really like to see Chris Bay face off against Eddie Edwards for the World Championship in the Open Challenge. I mean, if you're going to do it, if you're going to do this whole Open Challenge format, as I mentioned, then the whole point of having the Open Challenge is that you face multiple different opponents that you wouldn't usually face. Realistically, a world champion, if he's doing a feud from month to month or every couple of months, and say if he's lucky to be champion for a year, then most likely he will defend the world championship against 6, 7, or 8 opponents. If you've got an Open Challenge format, you can get through that amount of opponents in 6, 7, or 8 weeks. So that's what they can do here. They can have some really unique and different matches that we wouldn't usually get from Eddie Edwards. So what about Ken Shamrock? Now, Ken Shamrock, of course, was the first ever world champion in Impact Wrestling history, back when it was NWA TNA in 2002. He was the first person to become world champion, won the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship at their very first event. I think it would be really fun for an Open Challenge to have the current world champion go up against the very first world champion in the company's history. I think Impact Wrestling's use of Ken Shamrock so far since he returned to the company has been great. They haven't overexposed him. They've put him in positions where he can succeed. And look, Ken Shamrock, he can still go in the ring. He still looks great. Is he a little bit slower? Does he blow up a little bit? Yeah, but he's like 56 years old, and he could still kick the hell out of me and you. So I'm not going to say that to his face. And he could probably kick the hell out of the majority of the people on the Impact Wrestling roster, or any roster for that matter. So anyone to say that Ken Shamrock shouldn't be in the ring at his age or can't do it anymore is just, they're out of their mind. That's essentially what it is. They're out of their mind, because Ken Shamrock can still go, he can still work, he can tell great stories in the matches, and that's the thing which some people don't understand. People go, well, he can't do what he used to do in the ring, so why should he be in the ring? It's ridiculous. Like, wrestling matches are all about telling stories. That's what pro wrestling is, telling stories. So yeah, Ken Shamrock might not be able to do a backflip or whatever, but he can tell a story. He can do an ankle lock. He can work a body part. He can have a submission. He can get younger talent over. He can get a world champion over. How good would it look for Eddie Edwards to face off against someone as well revered and iconic as Ken Shamrock, defeat him, and then have Ken Shamrock shake his hand in the middle of the ring and say, "This is the world champion. This is the guy in Impact Wrestling." I think it'd be pretty badass, and it'd be a great moment and a way to further elevate Eddie Edwards as a world champion in Impact Wrestling. So I'd love to see Ken Shamrock face Eddie Edwards for the world championship. Now, what about going from Ken Shamrock? We go from one end of the spectrum right to the other. What about Johnny Swinger? Now, Johnny Swinger, of course, isn't going to beat Eddie Edwards for the World Championship. Don't worry about that. But sometimes with these open challenges, every opponent can't be the same. They can't be the same type of opponent. So that's why it's good to have like a Chris Bay to a Ken Shamrock and then maybe to a Johnny Swinger, right? Chris Bay, you've got the high-flying X Division style. Ken Shamrock, you've got the gritty sort of MMA style, but an older legend. And then you go from Johnny to Johnny Swinger, who's a comedy guy. He's a legend, right? He's done quite a lot in professional wrestling, and he's however many years he's been in the business at this point, probably what he's been in since the 90s, so like 25 years. He can say, I'm going to finally have my first World Championship opportunity against Eddie Edwards, and then just get the hell kicked out of him. I really enjoyed a couple of weeks ago seeing him dress up as Suicide to face off against Willie Mack in an X Division Championship match on Impact Wrestling, and why not? Why not have him here? I mentioned that he could have a match with Chris Bay. We've seen Johnny Swinger associated with Chris Bay. Why not? Why not have Johnny Swinger come out? Eddie Edwards will beat him comfortably and very quickly, but it'll be entertaining television. If it's entertaining, then it works. If it gets people watching, then it works. So why not have Johnny Swinger? What about Moose? Now this is an interesting one, isn't it? Moose, he's currently the TNA World Heavyweight Champion. He's calling himself the Real World Champion. He's got a modified version now of the old TNA World Heavyweight Championship. He's got the white leather belt instead of the black leather on there. I think it looks gorgeous, by the way. It's an absolutely beautiful looking title. It already was a nice looking title anyway, but with that white leather, it's just next level stuff. It's beautiful. He's calling himself the Real World Champion. Forget anyone else in Impact Wrestling. Well, what better way to further cement yourself as the real world champion than actually becoming the real world champion? We can finally have the Impact World Champion versus the TNA World Heavyweight Champion. We can have almost a unification of both belts, maybe. I don't know if they'll do it like that, but they certainly could be an idea for Moose to answer the open challenge and say that he wants to further solidify himself as the real world champion, so he decides to challenge Eddie Edwards for the Impact World Championship. I don't think Moose would become the Impact World Champion, but I think it would be a nice way to continue the TNA World Heavyweight Championship storyline. I think also you could potentially have EC3 come and get involved in that one. We'll touch on that in a second, which could lead to further things between not only EC3 and Moose, which looks to be the direction that they're going in right now, but also EC3 and Eddie Edwards for the Impact World Championship in the future, which goes on to my next person that could potentially face Eddie Edwards for the Impact World Championship. What about EC3? Now, they're doing this whole storyline at the moment that EC3, the control your narrative, the narrative storyline, we all know about that sort of stuff. But on commentary, we keep hearing Josh Matthews say that EC3 is not even signed here. He's not even signed to Impact Wrestling. He's not a part of Impact Wrestling. He hasn't signed a contract here. Of course, that's absolute BS. EC3 is absolutely under contract with Impact Wrestling. How long it is, we don't know. But he's under contract with Impact Wrestling. It's without a shadow of a doubt. They were heavily promoting him for the show this past week. He was the last thing that people saw as they went off the air at Slammiversary. He's arguably the biggest star they've got on their roster now, and I think, in my opinion, the biggest signing. Maybe the Good Brothers might be slightly, as a package and well known, are probably bigger than him, but I think EC3 is the guy that the company is going to build themselves around in the future. I think EC3, I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think he'll go to AEW because I don't see the reasoning there. There's nowhere else to go. He might have a few shots in Japan if he can make that work, but that doesn't mean he will leave Impact Wrestling. Far from it. He'll just do what the Good Brothers are doing and work the dates around their Impact Wrestling dates. EC3, to me, as I mentioned, is the guy that I think that Impact Wrestling will build the company around in the future. He's got history in the company. He looks like a star. He can cut a great promo. A lot of people like him. He's got a ton of fans on social media. He's got a ton of momentum and steam at the moment heading off his WWE release. He's done the best job in terms of his social media game, in terms of hyping himself up, getting people excited about what he's going to do next, where he's going to go next, and that's happened to be Impact Wrestling. So Impact Wrestling have done very, very well to sign him and to pull together a great deal there. And the idea that he isn't currently signed to Impact Wrestling is just not the case. That's just not true. So without a shadow of a doubt, I think EC3 could potentially answer the Impact World Championship Open Challenge of Eddie Edwards. Do I think he'll win? It's certainly possible. It is certainly possible that he might be the one to dethrone Eddie Edwards. Whether or not that happens on an Impact Wrestling on Tuesday on Access TV, or that happens at Bound for Glory or something like that, we'll have to wait and see. But I certainly think we're going to see EC3 versus Eddie Edwards in the future, regardless of if on commentary they say that he's signed or not. Maybe they'll do a thing whereby they say someone outside of the company, someone who isn't signed to the company, answers the open challenge. Because it's not a match fully sanctioned by Impact Wrestling, anyone can answer it. So that includes people outside the company, that being EC3. Maybe he answers it, wins the World Championship, and then Impact feel like they're in a state of flux because, the World Champion isn't even signed with us anymore. And they try and do that whole storyline. Maybe Moose tries to step up, then says, well, you've got a World Champion right here, and he's the World Champion for a while. There's lots of different ways that they could do that with EC3 without a doubt. And look, an EC3 versus Eddie Edwards match for the World Championship, I think would be great to see. Now, some other names. What about Chris Sabin? Chris Sabin returned to the company this past weekend at Slammiversary as part of the Motor City Machine Guns. They defeated the Rascals in the Tag Team Open Challenge. So perhaps he could go into this Open Challenge to face Eddie Edwards this past week on Impact Wrestling as well. He, along with Alex Shelley in the Motor City Machine Guns, defeated the North to become the brand new Impact Tag Team Champions. Chris Sabin himself is also a former TNA World Heavyweight Champion in his own right. So he could challenge Eddie Edwards, say, look, I'm a former world champion myself. I want to get that championship back. I've had a horrible time with knee injuries. He's torn ACLs in both the knees multiple times. He tore his ACL, I don't know in which knee it was, but he tore his ACL back in January, once again of this year. So to be back in the ring doing what he's doing right now by July, as part of the Motor City Machine Guns, as being the Impact Tag Team Champions, is a just spectacularly phenomenal feat. And I know that's a lot of superlatives being used there, but it's really, really amazing to see. Do I think he'll become the Impact World Champion? I don't think so. I think he's too focused on tag team wrestling right now, and I think that's best suited for him. You don't want to overstrain those knees, and let's be honest, it works best for him to do tag matches. It's not as taxing on the body, so that makes the most sense for him to do tag matches. But a one-off singles match for the Impact World Championship, why not? Why not? I'd love to see Chris Sabin versus Eddie Edwards for the Impact World title. What about Sami Callihan? Sami Callihan, again, is a former Impact World Champion. Lost the championship to Tessa Blanchard back in January of this year. He could open up and say, look, the old champion is gone. I want to face the new champion. I want to face the new pretender to the throne. He could potentially claim that, I don't know, when Tessa Blanchard was stripped of the Impact World Championship to make it vacant, maybe he deserves to get the championship handed back to him. Therefore, maybe he has a rightful claim to the Impact World Championship. Of course, it doesn't work like that. Of course, nothing in professional wrestling works like that, but there's certainly something they could do there, and he could certainly do his whole hacker gimmick and hack into the feed and say that someone else was going to answer the open challenge, but he hacks in and then gets into the open challenge himself. Who knows? They could do something like that. So Sami Callihan is definitely an option. What about Rob Van Dam? We know that RVD did work the past television tapings this past week, the post-Slammiversary tapings for Impact Wrestling, so we know that he's back. He had a promo this past week on Impact Wrestling with Katie Forbes, talking about being back on television. Previously, they were part of, was it the Cancel Culture faction with Joey Ryan, etc. Of course, Joey Ryan is now no longer with the company after Impact severed ties with him as part of the numerous speaking out allegations made against him over the last couple of months. So that gimmick and angle has been dropped. It looks to me that RVD and Katie Forbes are back doing what they were doing prior, being a bit risque. Certainly Katie Forbes is, and RVD is going along with it, but RVD is still RVD. He's still a former WWE champion, former ECW champion, one of the most innovative and trailblazing athletes that we have seen compete in professional wrestling in the last 20 years. His work in ECW in the 90s is still revered today, and rightfully so. Arguably the biggest star to come out of ECW from the 90s, homegrown star, and just a legend. He's a legend. He's a WWE Hall of Famer. Even though he's not been inducted yet, he will be a WWE Hall of Famer one day. So to get Eddie Edwards to face off against RVD for a one-off on Impact Wrestling on Access TV for the Impact World Championship, I don't see RVD becoming the Impact World Champion anytime soon. But of course, RVD is a former TNA World Heavyweight Champion back in 2010. So to get Eddie Edwards as the Impact World Champion, to me, going over against someone like RVD adds credibility to Eddie Edwards and his World Championship reign, so it makes the most sense in the world. So I could see RVD certainly being a challenger for Eddie Edwards' World Championship in this open challenge style format. What about Zack Ryder? Now, we know that Brian Myers is coming to Impact Wrestling. He had a vignette this past week on Impact Wrestling on Access TV. So perhaps, of course, Brian Myers could be a challenger for Eddie Edwards' Impact World Championship, as he's doing the Open Challenge every single week. Perhaps this is where we see the debut of Brian Myers, or the re-debut, the return of Brian Myers back to Impact Wrestling. Of course, Brian Myers is a former TNA World Tag Team Champion with Trevor Lee back in 2015. So perhaps this could be the way that they reintroduce Brian Myers back to Impact Wrestling. But what about Zack Ryder? We don't know what's really going on with him right now. Speculation that he was going to be joining AEW. Speculation that he was going to be joining Impact Wrestling. He had been hyping up his July 18th date on his social media, as well as Brian Myers. Of course, July 18th was the date that the people that were released by WWE back in April, their non-compete clauses expired. And we've seen that Brian Myers has indeed sided with Impact Wrestling. So many people have thought, well, what about his best friend? What about his tag team partner, Zack Ryder? We haven't heard anything yet. I still think, personally, it would be in Zack Ryder's best interest to sign with Impact Wrestling. I don't think that AEW is the right place for him, purely because of the amount of bodies and stars that are there. I think if he goes to Impact Wrestling, he can potentially be a world champion. Do I think he'll win it on his first night or anything like that? No, I don't think so. But I think having him debut against Eddie Edwards in an Impact World Championship match is the best way to debut Zack Ryder. They can always do a finish where neither person wins, so you don't have Zack Ryder doing jobs on his first match on the show. But certainly I think that'd be a fun way to debut him. And finally, what about Willie Mack? The former X Division champion lost the X Division championship to Chris Bay at Slammiversary, also lost the rematch this past week. I think as they're going from week to week and they're having some people outside of the company, some people in the company, and some main event players and some not main event players, I think Willie Mack's a great person to challenge Eddie Edwards, purely because I think the match itself would be great. I'm such a big fan of Willie Mack. I think his in-ring work is great. For the size he is, some of the things that he can do is phenomenal. I want to see Willie Mack wrestle Chris Bay to the end of time. I thought their two matches at Slammiversary and this past week on Impact were great. But I'd also like to see Willie Mack go up against Eddie Edwards for the Impact World Championship, and I think he's a likely challenger and someone that will answer this challenge. They can't always be outside of the roster. They have to be on the roster too. And they can't always be the top main event players, as I mentioned. The great thing about the Open Challenge style format is that you get people over and you get people opportunities that probably wouldn't have opportunities at the Impact World Championship prior to the World Championship Open Challenge. So I think Willie Mack is a suitable person to answer Eddie Edwards' Open Challenge. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. Who would you like to see answer Eddie Edwards' Impact World Championship Open Challenge every week on Impact Wrestling on Access TV? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to respond to all of your comments. I really enjoy interacting with all of you guys in the comment section there. If you do enjoy this video, please do give us a like. It really does help us out in reaching more people and getting in people's recommendation feed. So if you had enjoyed the video, please do give us a like. Likewise, if you've enjoyed it so much you want to share it, you can do that also by clicking the share button. And most importantly, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. We're on the road to 600 subscribers, on the long road to 1,000 subscribers. Once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we'll be doing weekly watch-alongs and live streams and reactions to the likes of Impact Wrestling, Monday Night Raw, Friday Night SmackDown, AEW Dynamite, pay-per-views, you name it, we'll be doing it. So once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we will be doing that. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe. If you have subscribed already, I really, really do appreciate it. You're the reason that I continue making videos on this channel to talk about wrestling with you. It's like talking about wrestling to a friend. That's what I try and do on this channel. So thank you very much for everyone that supported us. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak with you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.